Welcome to CoMotion Labs, Fundamentals for Startups. I am Siri V. Monchalau, Manager of CoMotion Labs for the Hardware Incubator. At the Hardware Incubator, we work with startups in medical technology, health science, applied physics, and sustainable technology, and support prototyping and product development efforts. Fundamentals for Startups is our regular lecture series open to anyone interested in learning about entrepreneurship or building a startup. Each week, we feature experts from various fields who bring you insight and inspiration and give you the opportunity to ask questions. All sessions are recorded and archived on CoMotion's website. For a full schedule and to register for future fundamentals, please visit bit.ly/CoMotion Fundamentals. CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator program hosting early-stage startups from both inside and outside the UW community. We're committed to nurturing and enabling startup success through critical infrastructure, training, mentoring, and networking. And we do this without taking equity or IP. We operate out of 3 locations on campus, each with its own industry focus. The Life Science and Hardware Incubators, which are both in Fluke Hall, and our Technology Incubator, which is here in Startup Hall. If you are a founder looking for somewhere to thrive, we'd love to talk to you. Before I introduce today's speaker, I want to mention that for next week's event, Catherine Sizoff, co-founder and CEO of Strela Biotechnology, will present Catching the Low-Hanging Fruit, My Candid Journey Starting a Company from Idea to Series A. Today, Grand Canary is here to present Aligning Economic and Ecological Benefits in Reforestation. Grand Canary is founder and chief executive officer of Mass Reforestation, the largest vertically integrated reforestation company in the U.S. Grant has focused his entire career on sustainability, working at Vestas, Wind Energy in China, the U.S. and Denmark, and for the U.S. Green Building Council in its infancy. I will now turn the event over to Grant.
All right, hello. Audio sounds like that's looking good. One of the things I love to do, there's a little bit of echo, but we'll get it sorted out. I love to get an idea of where people are at, so that and what problems they're facing, so that I can help target what I'm talking about specifically. So warm up your arms a little bit, and if we've got access to chat online, would love to hear some shout outs about that. But I would love to hear kind of starting off with just, are people at if I can see a show of hands for seed stage of company? Seed stage. You're raising capital in the seed stage. Okay. Angel, friends and family stage. Okay. I see 2 hands there. And then Series A. Some people are getting pointed out. They're grabbing food. Okay. Anyone in B or C or later? Okay. I'm not seeing anything along those lines. All right, great. And then the other things I want to ask is just like, as far as interest in hearing more about hiring people. Do you have a show of hands there? Got 2 hands there. All right, so that'll give me a little bit on kind of where I spend and how I target my time, and then fundraising. Who's fundraising right now or imminently in the next month or 2? Okay, a couple hands there. People are very involved with their food. I get it. That's where I'm headed after this. All right, so what we'll talk through here, we're going to talk through Mass finance model, little journey that we went through. What the company does, and then also carbon credits and post-fire reforestation. And yes, I do have a slide with John Oliver referencing the carbon credits. So for those skeptics out there, you're my target audience. So I welcome that discussion. I have some tactical topics that I prepared that we'll see where people's relevance goes, and then some resources, some things that help me along the way, and some Q&A. We'll go from there. So when we were here in Startup Hall, we were known as Drone Seed. We've since just rebranded to Mass Reforestation, or rather launched a parent company brand. What we do is we build an end-to-end solution to restore burned forests. I wanted to have some street cred when I came in here, so this is a shot from 2016 of us right over there and the early team, and then this is us at Techstars Demo Day. So yeah, we hired a lot of people actually in this room back here. So for those doing that, have some things to say there. Some social proofing here. 2021. We raised a $36 million Series A. You can see some of the names here: 776, Social Capital, DBL, who was early into Tesla. Co-founder of Tesla, Mark Tarpening, is on our board and is one of the most humble people I know. So it's really awesome to get to interact with him. We acquired, so in our journey from 2016 to present, we acquired 133-year-old Silvaseed in 2021. We built the tech to double year-over-year seed collections. So those are seed zones, and we can talk a little bit about that, but those little orange dots indicating the increase in seed supply. And we did that in partnership with local communities. Really important how we focus and work with folks. We now manage a majority of the Northwest forest seed inventory for land managers. And we've made a lot more seed available. So if you've seen The Wired, the Fast Company, Nat Geo, there is not enough tree seed. There's not enough grow space. We'll talk a little bit about that. But this is what it looks like on a time series of how we've increased the geographic coverage of seed availability to frontline communities affected by wildfires. So we shared very recently, a couple of weeks ago, another acquisition, which is Forest Nurseries. So we now grow the majority of California's trees. So you can see some of the shots there of like what those operations look like, and just kind of what we're about and what we do. So under this, much farther beyond just utilization of aircraft and the reforestation in the field, so we launched a parent company brand. That's Mass Reforestation, because we are providing an end-to-end solution from seed all the way through seedlings and then getting it out to site and then paying for it with carbon removal credits, without which there just wouldn't be the money available for the reforestation. Our mission has remained the same the entire time, and the mission, when we talk about hiring, we'll be able to speak to that as well. But the mission remains the same, which is make reforestation scalable, mitigate the worst effects of climate change. Now, as significant players in the U.S. supply chain, we can very authoritatively say the supply chain to restore forests, given the increase in size and severity of fires, isn't there to do it. Not yet. So, to talk a little bit about the impact, global wildfire emissions in 2021, not really discussed because there's no corporate bad guy polluting. Well, all right, there's one missing. I guess there's a skipped slide there. But basically, it's double that of Germany's. And you can kind of see a nice little video of what that looks like and the radiative power of what that's emitting. To really drive it home in a more like local context, California's 2020 wildfires emitted 127 million metric tons of the CO2 equivalent. The state's 18 years of reductions total only 65 million metric tons. So 18 years of hard-won policy changes and fights to get those passed. California's 2020 fire season wiped that out, single summer. So that's just one metric that doesn't measure the yearly water loss, because trees at the right density, not too many, not too few, increase the amount of water that flows downstream and then sits behind dams. It doesn't account for the water treatment. Trees, forests effectively negate the need for a lot of those big circular water treatment plants, and it's not speaking to the biodiversity and habitat. So it is absolutely critical to restore these carbon sinks. Now, how is it that, as a startups are often boast and they make fun of the incumbents and say, oh man, there's a number of negative tags that they give to the incumbents in the space. How is it that there's not a mature reforestation ecosystem out there? We've had a century of fire exclusion. So here's Tom Porter, California's state fire chief. They used to have 10 years to reforest after a 10,000 acre fire. So think about the latest like news articles that you've heard and things like that. 10,000 is like a very small fire these days. We're looking at 100,000 is like what makes the news, and that's only what you hear about. There are hundreds of fires every year. There was a 1 million acre wildfire in Alaska last year in 2022. Pretty much didn't even make the news because it wasn't impacting humans in a big way. So all this is to say that they had a long time to respond to really, really small fires for nearly 100 years. So the supply chain on the seed, on the greenhouses, et cetera, did not need to respond in a really big way. So then we look at like, okay, well, the human supply chain's not there, but what about the natural supply chain? Forest burns, forest regrows, right? That was the case 90% of the time when we were dealing with low severity fires. Now we have, with climate change fueled fires, much higher severity fires and much bigger areas. So what happens there is that we see with the forest regeneration, it's dropped down to 60% to 40% likelihood of regenerating naturally. So pattern matches with glaciers, pattern matches with coral, and the other things that you see. So you can see that here in the data. The 10-year rolling data from National Interagency Fire Center, 2.7 million acres going back to 92 to 82. Fast forward to present day, 2023, 7.5 million acres a year burning on average, on a 10-year average, meaning some years it's a lot higher. That 5 million acre difference is about the size of the state of New Jersey. So that just gives you an idea of the context and the size, or if you prefer, about 5 times what Weyerhaeuser, the biggest timber company in the United States, would likely do in a year for reforestation. So what we're here to say is really like every step of the supply chain is bottlenecked. It's overwhelmed, both the human side and the natural regeneration side. And we don't expect you to know what each step is, but generally you need seed. Nothing happens without seed. You need seedlings grown in a greenhouse. You need some way to get it out to site, the field operations, and you need to pay for it. So that's where the finance comes in, because if the tree is just burned, the typical source of funding for reforestation is coming from cutting trees, sending them to the mill, getting that revenue, and then turning around and paying for the reforestation. So what happens to this land? It burns, it's not naturally regenerating, it's not getting paid to be reforested. Well, in the off chance that you can get it back into a state to utilize for timber, my background coming from U.S. Green Building Council, timber utilized in long-term buildings locks up that carbon. It's a sustainable building material people love. The reforestation costs are really high, $300 to $1,200 an acre, and you better have the capital already in your accounts able to deploy. And that can be a significant amount of money. If you start to, you think 100,000 acre fire, you're a landowner with 2,000 acres or something like that, you multiply that by 1,200, you're all of a sudden talking about millions of dollars really quickly. And you've got to wait 25 to 60 years for your return on investment. And also, one more kicker, it's got to be near a mill, because otherwise you're never getting that return on investment because it's too much money to haul it 100, 200, 600, 1,000 miles. That starts to get really, really cost prohibitive. So you can do nothing. What happens? You get invasives like this Scotch broom, or you get 10-foot brush. Ecological term is a persistent early seral phase. It is a significant cost per acre to eliminate. If it's ignored, if you plant a small 6-inch, 8-inch tall seedling, it's going to get shaded out by all that other vegetation. It is also much more likely to reburn, meaning that it is an invasive. It goes with a spray and pray methodology. It's not adapted to retain moisture like the native vegetations through long drying periods. So it's just drying out. It's basically kindling for the next fire. And it also reduces biodiversity and habitat. All the animals, all the other things that are out there, not adjusted to utilizing and working with those in many cases, so it starts to reduce to only those that are more adaptive than others. The last one here is carbon, and this is what we do. So no upfront cost. We'll have some more announcements coming up on that, but basically it's financed because we're utilizing carbon removal credits. It's a better return than timber, or 3 years or less, and it's full as a service. A lot of places don't have seed. We're able to go out there and collect it. We're able to manage that preparation of the site because we can get out there immediately after a fire. We grow the seedlings at Silvaseed and Cal Forest, and then we plant. We do the contracting. And then we go through all of the how do we get it down to the methodology and the removal. We are tapping into a rapidly growing market with carbon offsets, projected to reach 50 billion by 2030. Now, there's two markets: the voluntary market and the carbon market. That is compliance. They are different, so we'll start to tease out some of those things, but you can see the difference there in the numbers. The voluntary market projected to reach 50 billion. More growth is also coming with the SEC, already voted 3-1 in favor of all publicly traded companies, first large and then small market cap, must disclose their emissions. This is just disclose them. Right now, 46% of those companies don't do it, and they don't do it according to a standard methodology. So right now, at least in 2022, if you look at Amazon's footprint, it's showing as less than Target. It's just a difference in methodology. Target thinks about how do employees come to work differently than Amazon, and that has an impact on footprint. So this takes all of it and standardizes it so it's more like accounting. Everybody uses the same accounting principles for carbon coming from the SEC. That's the final rulings due out in April, so really excited about that. This moves it from a marketing exercise to an SEC compliance exercise, aka you can get sued by your shareholders for doing it wrong. That's not the case today with marketing. So we've created reforestation as a service, and in 2022, we doubled landowner investment. 300 acres, response to the Beachy Creek fire, close to where my family lives. 2023, we eliminated the need entirely for a landowner investment with a return that's superior to timber, 2,700 acres. This is up in Montana, Sheep Creek. We've got 7.5 million acres of other land managers each year needing access to these services, the seed, and we connect with them through local community members. Our existing customer base at Silvaseed and Cal Forest, you see there, consulting foresters, land trusts and nonprofits, and then land brokers. So where we're at just in funnel is having 50,000 acres in dialogue and about 8.5 thousand acres signed or under LOI. And I guess what I wanted to take you through here today is just kind of what's the sort of on the ground, like why does somebody who's up in Montana want to go in this direction? So landowner story here, affected by the fire. This is a family-owned property, a lot of habitat. It's near the Yellowstone elk migration corridor. The consulting forester who brought us this project knew this was going to be really difficult. And the reason they knew this is because they had tried to do a 110-acre project, and hats off to them for getting it done, and hats off to this community. But the way in which they did it really doesn't scale. There wasn't enough money, so they got donations from a nonprofit. There wasn't enough seed, so they had to work with local legislators and the Department of Natural Resources to get access to that scarce seed, get some scarce grow space, and there wasn't enough labor. So volunteers from the community went out, planted a bunch of trees. For consulting foresters, that's scary because a lot of volunteer planters plant trees in a way that the roots aren't positioned to go the right direction. It's called a J root, and they're more likely to die. And so that's really frustrating after you've done all this extra other work. So they're looking at this and going, man, that was a huge lift to get 110 acres done. Now I got 2,700 acres, and by the way, there's a bunch of adjacent landowners also all looking at this. What we're able to do was, because we have the financing from the carbon removal credits, basically go out there, identify where is their mast, which is where we get our namesake. It means a bountiful crop of cones. Trees do not provide that bountiful crop of cones every year. It's once or twice a decade. So we were able to find some areas that had mast, hire the tree climbers to get out there, collect the cones, send it back to Silvaseed in Roy, Washington here, south of Tacoma, get it processed there, and then get it started in the nursery to turn it into seedlings. At the same time, we're removing, when I say site prep, removing the burnt timber. So that's basically chainsaws in the woods, taking down a whole bunch of dead burnt trees. Now, why do we do that? Because that's fuel for the next fire in many cases. It's a site-by-site basis, so I'm simplifying here, but think like an old campfire. That's great an old campfire log, that's great to start the next campfire. So we remove that, and then we get out there and we'll be planting those seedlings come spring and fall coming up. So we take care of all of that on behalf of the land manager. All right, so dealing with carbon removal credits and some of the like skepticism and knowledge and things all around those. The criticism really actually accelerates the development of the highest quality offsets. But one of the things that I want to sort of provide nuance on, and this is really my rallying cry, is like there are 170 types of carbon credits. So if you're out there saying like, I don't believe carbon credits should exist, you're right up there with the people who are like, I don't believe that interest should exist. People shouldn't lend other people money at interest. Well, of course there's predatory loans, and like everybody should rail against those, and those are not helpful for people or communities. And of course there are new finance texts that are coming, like piece of financial innovations that are coming along. But it's that's a pretty broad brushstroke to say 170 credit types from 100 countries, I'm against all of them. Just carte blanche, they shouldn't exist. That's just it's super frustrating, because for us, that is where the source of capital comes from to reforest. For others that are out there, if you're in biochar, if you're working with oceans and doing some of the blue carbon focus, like that is where the money is coming from for the innovation in climate tech. Is oftentimes it is tied to a carbon removal credit type. So looking at the data, our removal credits are top tier quality as the numbers show it. So forestry traded at the highest volume, and removals inside of forestry are the subtype traded at the highest price because of the quality. So let me get into some of the like insanely difficult work we do to really make these credits high quality. So these are post-fire forests unlikely to naturally regenerate. We work with the Climate Action Reserve, so very similar to U.S. Green Building Council, or if you're in electronics, some of the other certification groups. They're a nonprofit, and they basically say, we want you to follow this methodology, we'll review all your documents, and then we'll say, great, you followed the methodology, you can put your removal credits on the registry. They require that we do an analysis and say, okay, there's low severity and high severity burns, you're getting credit for the areas of high severity that are unlikely to regenerate. You don't get credit for trees that are going to live and be fine. That's not part of our projects. Immediately after we plant, there's a 1-year waiting period after the last tree goes in the ground, where an accredited third-party forester comes out to make sure the trees have survived a year, a minimum of a year. So what's the big things that kill trees? Drought, desiccation, and predation. So basically this makes sure the trees have gone through at least one summer. And this really helps so that like the trees are alive, they come back, they do fixed radius plots, which is just a fancy sampling mechanism to say the trees are alive, they're in the right quantity, they're the right species. From there, there's 100+ years of funded monitoring and an insurance buffer pool that I'll talk a little bit about here. Actually, I guess I'll talk about them right here. So the 100+ years of funded monitoring. Every project that we set up, it's working with a project. We create a project endowment similar to a university that has an endowment. It's invested in the market, provides a return. That return pays for an annual site report and then a site visit every 5 years. So that is for the next 100+ years. The landowner and land manager is putting a conservation easement on the property that the Nationally Accredited Land Trust has the right to go in and then monitor and make sure there's a minimum quantity of trees per acre. So that's 100+ years, and it's funded. Additionally, there's an insurance buffer pool. So we've got a lot of buyers, Shopify, others. They need to know that what happens if there's another fire? What happens if there's insects, other sort of reversals is the technical term. So every project, say it's going to issue 100,000 tons of removal over the next 100 years. Some portion of that, call it 10%, 15%, is put into a buffer pool by Climate Action Reserve before anybody ever touches it. And that way, it's known that if there is, every project's doing this, if there is a reversal, a project is impacted by fire, those, just like auto or health insurance, people are paying into a pool, you have the accident, that's unfortunate, insurance pays you out. Very similarly, those offsets are then removed from the pool. What happens if there's more fire because climate change? people do exactly what you do in an insurance system. People pay higher premiums, so every new project has to put more into the buffer pool. So these are some of the things that go into the MRV, which stands for monitoring, reporting, and verification. We also expect there to be fire at the sites. We expect our trees to live. Here is why. Our target density is far fewer trees per acre than either public land or privately owned for timber. The reason for that is that Climate Action Reserve doesn't give you credit for going into a 300, 400 trees per acre in the case of the Northwest, which is pretty typical for timber. We are targeting much lower density. We start at 300, and then over time at year 25, year 30, year 40, we're looking for 200, 130 trees per acre. So much lower density, so that's good for fire. We're also utilizing a polyculture. So our first project, 8 different species, all natives. We get that question a lot. It actually goes way, way deeper than just natives. It's way more scientific and specific than that. But polycultures have a greater fire resilience and much better habitat. To make it more like human relatable, like imagine yourself as a deer or something. You go out into the woods and every tree looks the exact same species, and it's just that way for 100,000, 200,000 acres. That'd be like us getting on the freeway and every car is blue. And you just be sort of like, whoa, something's up. I'm not sure what it is, but like this is odd. So having a polyculture, better habitat. And then lastly, genetic diversity. So we collect from seed as close to a fire as possible so that when we go back out there, we get the highest possible survival rate. And the reason for that is a Doug fir from the coast, it's going to be adapted to the salt in the soil, in the air, in the water. That's like because of proximity to the ocean. And it's also used to low elevation. You try and transplant that same Doug fir inland, put it at like 5,000, 4,000 feet, something along those lines. Like all of a sudden you're going to have these problems because all that salt's not there that it's adapted for, and then all of a sudden there's less oxygen in the air. So you want to utilize, and this goes for so many other factors, north-facing, south-facing of mountain ranges, valleys, depressions, other things like that. So this is something that the U.S. Forest Service created these seed zones that I mentioned at the top of the presentation in the 20s, updated in the 70s. So that's something where we're looking for seed as close to the fire zone as possible. So all of this is a hell of a lot of work, which is why our first project sold out. High quality credits. So Shopify, $1 million sale there. That led to a lot of additional. Some of those are not yet announced, so you can see some of those there. In real estate, you see the CO2 by time, and then Shopify as well. So these entities, like what are they excited? They're excited about the tech enabling this growth. So I've shown this as kind of like how we've increased the seed. These are the seed zones. We've increased the seed available to communities impacted by fire in these seed zones. We're utilizing software to do that. And then we're also growing seedlings in half the time. We're not utilizing genetically modified organizations, but we're utilizing more sophisticated greenhouses, which reduces project timelines, improves the financials. So that's really where we're headed over time with that. In the field operations, you see what's there as a fire plug. That is a purpose-grown seedling grown in a more sophisticated greenhouse to do exactly that. It's the first seedling grown specifically for a post-fire environment that's optimized for the water and heat that is very different on a post-fire site with all that grass and other things. What you see on the right there, that seedling grown to be above the grass, as tall as possible, thinner, etc. What you see there on the left, not a lot of grass to worry about in the first immediacy after a fire. So you're really trying to take advantage of both the water table that's sending the roots straight down, and then the lateral water that's to the side. And then lastly, there's an opportunity with the ability to not just focus on carbon removal credits, but also some of the other co-benefits which are now starting to be credited. And I think this is really, really exciting because all of a sudden we have the opportunity to take what was called ecosystem services and start to connect that to the human economy and say, really, we value these things. This is something that we want to put a price on. For some people, that feels like it's like, oh man, you can't put a price on habitat for an animal. But in fact, like if we don't put a price on it, we're actually saying that we don't value it. To quote Beyonce, like if you like, you should have put a ring on it, right? Like you should have invested in it. You should have put money into it. Like that's a true like valuing of the thing. You care about it. And then lastly is the finance. Again, no upfront cost to the landowner. That's super important because a lot of these landowners, land managers, they don't have the capital. It's got to come from somewhere. And also the economics make a lot of sense. This is the net present value analysis for one site comparing timber to carbon. So it's pretty that just seeing those two numbers, you're like, well, which one's bigger? Yep, I'm doing that. So that is mass. That's a little bit about our journey, a little bit about our business model. I hope some of the folks that are coming from the carbon removal credits are like, interesting. I hadn't like taken it from that perspective. That's really my goal here. The other things that I have things to say on here are around hiring process, around pitching, around due diligence, and around the use of video. I'm going to start on pitching, and yeah, let's see. I'm going to just do a quick time check. Yeah, okay, we're right about on time. So a couple of things that I will sort of break down the mechanics of what I just went through there, so that hopefully it's a benefit to you as you're doing your pitching and your fundraising. By asking for a big student of improv, it helped me a ton. Jet City Improv, just up the road, did many semesters of that. If anybody's been to a improv show, one of the principles is taking a suggestion from the audience. If you listen to Whose Line Is It Anyway, or anything along those lines, it's really helpful because all of a sudden it makes the show, that show is now that audience's carefully crafted show. An example like of a suggestion, like what's the worst job you've ever had? I answered, I worked in a summer job in high school at Jiffy Lube. And all of a sudden this show like took on a whole meaning about Jiffy Lube, and it was my show, and I was really excited about that. What does this have to do with pitching? Asking you all kind of like what your interests are is a way to attain buy-in. Now, sharing the mechanic with you kind of destroys that, but it is a great way with investors. One of the first questions I like to ask is like, where do you want to spend time? What should I focus on? And you would think that like, oh, the answer is probably the same: problem, solution, team, market size, like traction. However, I've been thanked a number of times by investors for being able to like ask that question, because sometimes, no, at this stage, all I care about is if you're in seed or friends and family angel, like it's team, idea, and TAM. Like your traction secondary, I'm less interested. I want to, great, nice to have, but like that's what I'm sort of thinking about. And so it allows them to target. It also allows you to do a callback so that you can maintain their attention. If anybody's ever been in an investor pitch, someone starts looking at phones, somebody's like, you see like they're just sort of like, I made a joke and there was an audience response, so like clearly like they're not there, or I'm not funny, one of the two. Like what it allows you to do is sort of take that and say like, use their name, and then say like, as you mentioned with allocation of capital, yada, yada, and all of a sudden they're cued, they're right back in. And that's a great way of sort of maintaining the stage presence on the floor. It's a really simple mechanic borrowed from improv that really, really helps. For demo days, for Bloomberg, did an interview in the Seattle office here at Bloomberg. For demo day, the 2 weeks before Techstars demo day, I did something like 10 to 20 pitches a night. The same pitch, recorded on QuickTime. You can use Loom, you can do whatever you want. But it got me to a place, I did door-to-door sales as a high school summer job. What I found going door-to-door, selling a 10% increase to your energy bill so that it would come from renewable sources, not an easy product to sell. Not a lot of people are like, yes, I'd love a 10% increase to my electrical bill. I found that when I went door to door, I'd start off and my pitch would be long. And then as I started to do it over and over, door to door to door, I'd get 2 to 7 sales a day. My pitch got shorter. as I started cutting out all the extra pieces, because I was just frankly tired of saying it. And so like, what was the shortest route to get that same information across? So I found that really helpful. You get it really down pat. So that's something I found really, really helpful as a mechanic. Now, do I still do that? No. Once you've been on the road, like when it's a new pitch, like you've built a new deck, like I absolutely go out there and I want to road test it. This is known for comedians like Chris Rock and others will go out and they'll just show up at a club unannounced. And all of a sudden it's like, it's Chris Rock. And you're like, oh, whoa, like this is a no-name club and nowhere. And I'm getting to see it. Like they're testing out new material. So they don't want to be announced. They don't want to have those expectations. So like starting off with like internal and then going to some maybe like not your prime targets for your top investor and then getting through like 5, 10, 15 of those pitches, you get to a place where you're like, I don't need to do 20 pitches a night. But when you're sort of first getting that pitch down, I found that to be a really helpful. Before South by Southwest, like we had 6 to 8 minutes, so I was able to do like 4 to 6 of those a night before I went to sleep. Before I went to sleep was something that I found helpful, sort of the subconscious processes it. Yeah. Okay, more complex. You get the opportunity to go do a news interview. Self-respecting journalists are not going to give you their questions in advance. They may give you like topics. Bloomberg, not even going to give you topics. So I was like trying to prep for this and figure out, okay, awesome, we're going to go on Bloomberg. Cool, what do I do here? And I was like, so I like practiced with some friends because I got to all of a sudden, this is advanced level improv. I don't know the questions, etc. So how did I approach that? I went through and I watched a number of the interviews by Brad Stone and others, who was my interviewer for that one, and I timed it. And I figured out how many questions they got. What was the, I've watched 5, 10 of these, whatnot. What was the average response time for the first question was like 45 seconds to a minute. Politicians went 1:30. What were the sort of intermediate questions, 15 to 30 seconds? This is over a 3-minute, 4-minute interview. What was was there any pattern on like, by the way, we don't tell you when the interview's over. We're just going to be like, and thanks. You're just sort of like, what's your outro? And like anything about the future was like, okay, that's probably your last question. So like take more time, do 45 seconds, do a minute, talk about the future. So I broke that down. My first pitches, my first sort of like interviews like that, I was like trying to do the pitch. Oh my gosh, my friends were saved me and they're like, this is awful. Like don't go on Bloomberg and put that out there. And so had to do a lot of reps there. And actually somebody from Jet City was kind enough to jump on it and pretend to be an interviewer for me and give me feedback as well, which I also found to be like a really helpful mechanic. So for pitch practices, like press versus demo days versus sort of one-on-one pitches. Hopefully those are 3 different flavors. One-on-ones doing sort of the question at the beginning to maintain the audience attention, demo days, and then press. Due diligence process, if that's useful for people, give a shout out in the Q&A. I'm happy to go through it. Using video, we got told for Techstars Demo Day, like, don't use video, like it might break the presentation. Hopefully that advice is now very old and everyone's like, no, use video, it's great. 6 to 15 second video clips are awesome. We, at the time, paid something like several $1,000s for a 3 to 4 second CGI clip that some of the folks who worked on Lion King and a bunch of other amazing stuff like really discounted their rates to help us out because we have a mission that's focused on forests. And that 3-second clip was so good that we did have to tell people like this is CGI. I want to be genuine about that. But people could see the vision in 3 to 6 seconds. They would have taken me a minute and a half to explain, and people still would have been like, I kind of get it, but like really, like swarms of drones, like what's that look like? So visuals and video, I like highly recommend. Obviously, you don't want to have a minute and a half, 3 minutes of your 6 to 8 minute pitch be a video of someone else talking. That's weird. Probably don't want to have audio because so much can I think still really go wrong there. But video, I think, was something that for us, we went against the grain and it paid off in a big way. And then hiring process, using values and mission. super important. It came around as an accident for us, but I have a lot to say on hiring process if that's things that people are focused on. Resources that helped me along the way. Hard thing about hard things, can't recommend it enough. I love the intro to that book. Like most management books are like, you take something, you slice it into 4 quadrants, and you say, like, go be in this quadrant. It's done by a bunch of MBAs. The intro to that is like, this is not that book. This book is how I screwed everything up and in most cases fixed it. And so that's really, really helpful and instructive. Pitch anything. Helpful. You heard me use the phrase social proofing, something that Techstars at my time taught, speaks to that as well. The A method for hiring, that's where we cribbed our hiring process, but then put a lot of our own culture into it, utilizing our values. Do more faster. It's Techstars canon. Lean startup, Eric Ries. 10 years ago, A/B tests for website were not normal. That's where that book is where it comes from. So that's, out of date now. A Leader's Guide is his update for large corporations and larger companies. Multipliers, really, really good for management. Thinking about, I think the thing that sticks out to me is like in being a parent, if you can get your kids to a place where they're like, instead of like, go put on your coat now, do it now. If you can get them there, I'm not a parent, so I got to speak with some humility here. But if you can get them there saying like, hey, what do we do next? And ideally the child is like, go put on our coats. And like that same type of analogy applies to a lot of like management in a company. If you can get people to a place, can't always do it, where they're like, they already know what the process is, they're building it out, they're providing their expertise and value. Multipliers speaks in a really big way about that. It's counterintuitive. Because you lose control because other people are doing things, but your best teachers and your best coaches did that, and absolutely you get to take off a hat and help allow somebody else to help shoulder the burden, which regardless of how strong you are, like you cannot carry a company to scale solely or with like 1 or 2 people you trust. Like it's got to come from a lot more people. Necessary Endings, really, really important book on how to uses the analogy of like a rose bud or a plant, basically how to trim things so that the rest of the plant gets more nutrients. And that's really hard and really emotional to do. And I mentioned Jet City Improv at least twice. And the last one is poker, playing poker. I grew up playing chess. In chess, the best people can think maybe 12 moves ahead. And all the pieces on the board and see 12 moves ahead. That's really helpful for an analytical skill, but it doesn't factor in people lying or people using misdirection or emotions or other things. Poker is amazing at that. And one of the things that is amazing about poker is the number of times that you will see incredibly low probability things happen if you play long enough. I've seen a royal flush in a house game. I have seen some of the things that if you look at the like statistical odds of them occurring, they are incredibly low. And I have been beaten so many times by somebody who got the 2% card on the last card on the river. So like I think it helps to sort of think about like your R&D budget and the placing of bets, some of the other aspects of like how do you think about it as like wagers? Because that is important for product strategy. If you have 3 or 4 directions to go, how do you put some bets on 2 or 3 of those directions that are most probable, and then nip 1 or 2 if they're not panning out, aka fold the hand. So Startup Poker is here in Seattle. It's a great networking opportunity as well. You can play some poker, practice that skill. And with that, I think we've got about 15 minutes for Q&A. Are there questions? And I think there's we got a mic running around so that, in the back there. Wait for the mic so that the people online.
Oh, do you consider the mycorrhizal environment at all? Like, is any of your reforestation take that into account?
Yes. I have been humbled there. I'm a big fan of mycelium running, Paul Stamets. The way it's taken into account is in some of the micrositing, which planting a seedling next to a tree that has been cut or has been burned or is otherwise like it's just like kind of the root structure that's left over. There is a ton of fungi that's in the soil, in the root structure that is likely sort of disintegrating, that is open for new root structure. So that's really powerful. There's the dipping of roots in the nursery into mycelium. I think the science on that is mixed about how helpful that is, and some of it has to do with the scale. It was explained to me that like, oh, what if you like put it across the landscape? And it's like, well, if you're like a couple feet off from like a target seedling, that's like us to Pluto in some cases. Like I'm exaggerating here, but like for like that, like you like the precision has to be incredibly tight. So so I was asking that question in the same way, and so those are the two ways that it's really accounted for. In the front here, wait for the mic. Be kind to our folks online.
So I'm just curious.
Oh.
Just talk? Okay. When did you know that you needed to scale? Like at what point and what signals sort of indicated that it was time to scale your enterprise?
Let me think about that. I mean, first thing that comes to mind is like we're a mission-driven company. Make reforestation scalable, mitigate the worst effects of climate change. So the time to scale, like now, massively. Yeah. Now from a business sense, I'm trying to think of like what I can say of value, because there's a number of folks that you're looking at your weekly active users, you're looking at other metrics that are less applicable to us. We're more of a seasonal business that's focused on things. But I think it was really how fast can we provide scale to customers, and then how can we get customers to confirm that they're ready for that scale. And so, for example, like we do a demo with when we were doing a demo with a timber company or a tribal nation or a nonprofit, if we could get them to like, great, we're going to do this demo, and then after the demo, the immediate ask is like, are you ready to do more project sites, 3 or 4 of those now, or are you willing to do a much larger contract that will enable us to scale? And in some cases, the answer was yes, and in other cases, it was like, well, we'd really like you to like work with like different foresters in different regions and kind of do a demo with each of them. And it was like, oh, what? That's going to take a lot of time. And we just did the like prove it out for one forester. And it was a big lift. Like in order for us to hit our next metrics, like we need to see more. And so if we hit that, it was, we looked at that and said, ooh, maybe we need to change what our product focus is. And in many cases we did. In 2 cases we did.
So just to clarify, do you feel like the signal actually came from the market, like a direct request? Can you scale this? Like that's sort of one of the indicators.
Yes, sometimes comes from the market. Sometimes it comes from, can we deliver on that, or follow the money? If you're sort of working upstream, if you use some of the good to great analogies of like, for us, like where's the highest value part of the supply chain that we could work, or what's the most expensive part for a customer? Those are pieces that are helpful to assess and say, ooh, if this is high volume, low margin, maybe we need to move upstream to a higher margin part of the business if we're going to do low volume. That's some of the challenges that we faced, and one of the changes that we made, without getting into too much specifics, because there's some client details and other things that don't. Yeah. All right. Question here in the front. Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Is your model limited to coniferous forests, or does it work with deciduous canopy as well?
Right now we are focused on conifers. Limited is a funny word though, because like it's the Western 11 states, so it's pretty massive. and we have a huge reforestation debt because of fire. And so I think like we have our work cut out for us. It's kind of like, and from an investor perspective, the total addressable market, you multiply several million acres by somewhere between 300, in some cases, incredibly much more, several $1,000s an acre to reforest. All of a sudden, that TAM becomes wild, and the Forest Service has been struggling with that, and so that's something that, from our perspective. So yeah, I realize you didn't intend to be like, is it limited? But I'm coming at it from a perspective of like, it is a massive lift. But yeah, we are focused on conifers. Because of some of the attributes of seed and biology and what we can do to scale. But like conifers within the context of like, where are they coming from naturally? How do we combine different conifers in a really significant way, in a way they would be done in nature? Yeah.
It was great to hear that you're already thinking about the likelihood that some of your projects will burn, and that's part of your strategy. Have any of your projects burned? And based on your kind of understanding of the landscape, do you think that the current standards for the buffer, like set by the industry, are up to the task of buffering against current fire risk?
I'll make one sort of slight adjustment there. They're set by Climate Action Reserve. Industry could denote like a timber company or something. Timber company's not setting it. We're not setting it. A nonprofit third party setting it. So I think like very much so, like the buffer pool is there, and we focus on mitigation of that. 6 ways till Sunday. Like in a really, really big way, in the sense of like like the sort of the risk register. If you will accept the project management terminology there, like here's the risk, like it may burn in the future. Haven't had any burns, but we have been affected by heat domes. Heat domes in Oregon, melting electrical transmission lines, like probably not good for trees. And so how do we think about that? We think about a couple of things: purpose grown for post-fire, the ability to do multiple plantings. So because we are large and we have the supply chain, we can make the space in our own greenhouses that if we did not manage our supply chain, we would be like, oh no, like who can like find space for us in their greenhouse? And like everyone would be like, well, sorry, like we already booked that out 2 years ago, like it's full, like can't do anything for you. So then like what happens? Okay, we wait for the next slot, and then the blackberries and scotch broom come along. So by having that sort of large supply chain, we can manage it that way. So seedlings, the ability to do multiple plantings, the buffer pool, and then you go through like it's a much more genetically diverse seed source. So that's really good. All the arguments against GMO apply here, meaning that like if seed's coming from an orchard, it's by design old school bred, not GMO, but old school bred to have a very genetic strain to grow tall, fast, and be the most board feet per acre. So we have a much wider genetic variety, which diversity is how we manage risk there, and then lower density, and then multiple species. So the multiple species, I like to kind of point to ponderosa pine. It's like a crush bumper on a car. The bark is designed, evolved to burn, and the tree is like should live during that process. So those are some of the those are all the mitigations on the natural side and on the project, like how we set it up side, and then you've got the buffer pool. And then I think over the long term here, 2 to 5 years, there's probably some insurance systems that what insurance company doesn't want to take payments for 100 plus years. I think like that starts to be something that similarly like we'd expect to see.
I am a researcher in supply chain management. So I have a question. You spoke a little bit right now and even earlier about how you are using greenhouses instead of genetically modified varieties of crops to grow them better and more resistant to fire, right? So for example, in India right now, there is a huge focus of the government on cultivating more millets and shifting away from rice and wheat, which are sort of bad for the environment because they reduce the water table, etc. So now we are sort of thinking what can be done from a technology perspective and think about comparing and contrasting technology methods to improve the yield of millets vis-a-vis biogenetic methods of improving the yield. Technology-based approaches, supply chain-based approaches, what can be done, what are the costs? Is there any evidence-based study which shows that technology can play a huge role and sort of go above and beyond what genetically modified crops can achieve?
Yeah. I mean, I think that dovetails nicely to the last question. I just want to be very clear, like when we're talking about a purpose-grown seedling, a fire plug, we are not genetically modifying. That is where the technology comes in, is the sophistication in the greenhouse. So we train the seedling via environmental controls to better live in its future habitat, which if you have rudimentary greenhouses, a hoop house or something that doesn't have a lot of environmental controls, you really are just only able to provide what the sun, the wind, the rain at the site can provide, not necessarily what might be out there at a post-fire site. And so you can kind of think to some of those studies that, like, look, you can see a 2-degree drop if you're under shade, et cetera. And post-fire sites don't have that. They're just open out in the sun, getting baked. And so it's important to sort of get some of those, get those seedlings trained in that way. So the technology comes in, cow forest, silvaseed, turning them into really like Amazon fulfillment centers of seedlings. Like that's where the technology comes in. So that's where we see the fit. And the reason for that is because while it might be really tempting to be like, go GMO and like, we'll make it like grow really fast and do all these things, the resiliency over the longer term is really what we're managing for. And one of the best risk mitigation structures, if you're in fintech or others, is diversification. I mean, you think about your like retirement fund or savings or whatnot, like you don't want all your eggs in one basket. You want diverse genetic strains that are able to adapt, because that's a long-term hold. That's how we get the highest quality and the most value out of those carbon sinks, because all of that effort's lost if it's like, you know, one thing goes down. There was one question over there on the left, or up in the back as well. Oh, do we have online questions?
We have an online question.
Oh, sweet.
He's been waiting a while, so
okay.
I'm trying to jump in. Mark asks, are you concerned that the increasing size and rate of forest fires will devalue the reforestation carbon removal credits?
Well, that question may have come before the earlier question around like we expect there to be fire and we expect the trees to do fine. Like fire is part of the natural ecology, and in fact, like there's a couple of fun aspects if we want to nerd out about fire a little bit. Like if you've ever been in a mature forest and it seems like there's just not a lot of branches on the lower parts and whatnot. I mean, the fire removes a lot of that sort of like underbrush, so that's helpful if it's low severity fire. And if you look at like trees, like when trees like provide massed or plentiful amounts of cone, you got to go all the way up to the top of the tree, because of course it can't be easy, because those are the cones that are not incestuously pollinated. The tree hasn't like pollinated itself, which is the bottom 2/3. And so like from a fire perspective, low severity fire may burn some of that bottom part, the bushy part of the trees, but the tops of the trees are left with cones if it's a low severity fire. If it's a high severity fire, it's like if Looney Tunes is still a relevant reference, it's like a lightning bolt that hit a tree that's all black and has no more green left in it. Whereas like a fire that's low severity is like kind of like part of the ecology, which is helpful. It actually eliminates some project costs. So the trick is just make sure that fire is low severity, not high severity. And by having lower density forests, that's one of the ways to do that, by slowing fires down with crushed bumper type cars on the ponderosa pine or others. That's another way to do that. So there's a variety of ways there. Okay.
Grant, thank you for your presentation and for your important work. I have a question for you about IP. Have you pursued it? And if you haven't, why not? And if you have, what have you been doing with it? And the other question, related to that is, what do your investors want about IP? Do they have opinions about that, or are they pushing for you to pursue that?
Yes. I think we have 4 patents issued and 1 pending. How do we think about that? I mean, I think like there's some examples out there with Tesla providing its patents to others so that the supply chain grows. I think there's some other, so I like that philosophically. What do investors expect? I think the investors expect, it's less about like, show me the patents. It's more about how do you have a unique way that nobody else can come into this space and just take your lunch? What's your moat? And not all businesses have moat, especially in software. But that also is like a double-edged sword, because you can scale really fast in weekly active users and cloud-based servers and whatnot. But because you can scale really fast, you can also descale really fast. And so that's like what they're looking for. Like how does this impact? Is in my experience. For us, like where do we, what's the moat that we have? It's the seed supply. It's really that ability to manage seed on behalf of a large number of like land managers, and do so for a number of seed zones so that we can get the genetics that'll have the climate resilient aspects that I've been sort of speaking to. And that's really valuable, because you just don't want to be taking seed from California, Oregon, and moving it to Montana, because it's there's no, what says you can and can't do that? Well, you can't, the can't is like, well, you may see a catastrophic loss, like everything may die. You may see significantly decreased, or you don't hit your targets. So those are some of the like the moats for us that exist is in the seed. And then also like it would take, why doesn't some giant ag company just back up a dump truck of money and go acquire a bunch of seed? Well, you play this like game of Battleship of like, where is the mast in a year? And it'll take somebody 7 to 10 years to build up that inventory if the trees are only providing plentiful viable cones once or twice a decade. So that's some of the places that fits. Every business is going to be unique in that regard. So I don't know that I can speak to anyone's particular business, but that's how we've approached it. So hopefully that's helpful in the journey.
All right, everybody, that's all we have the time for. Thank you all for joining us today, and a big thank you to Grant for sharing his wisdom and experience with our group. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here.
As a reminder, next Friday at noon, we'll be hearing from Catherine Sizoff, who will present Catching the Low-Hanging Fruit, My Candid Journey Starting a Company from Idea to Series A. Sign up for that, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.